I was just finishing work on a project proposal, putting into it not only my knowledge and experience, but also that very piece of inner silence that sometimes became my only salvation from the eternal hum of business meetings, deadlines, and crowded morning subway cars, when the phone rang, and its vibration, as if emerging from oblivion, I cracked the fragile cocoon of concentration in which I carefully wrapped myself in order to finish everything to the last line. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. Mom's name flashed on the screen, flickering with the indifferent coldness of pixels, and I froze, frowning slightly, because lately answering my parents' calls had become an act of almost moral preparation for me, requiring effort and concentration, as if I were about to enter into an argument that could not be avoided. "Hi," I said, trying to put a neutral tone into my voice, as smooth as the surface of a frozen lake, so that no hint of irritation or fatigue would break through the words. "Edwidge, it's good that you picked up the phone." Mom's cheerful, almost jubilant voice, which, as I soon realized, came not so much from her as through my father's tired lips, made me shrink back into my chair, as if waiting for another scolding or the sudden announcement of another small family disaster. "Dad and I are planning your birthday celebration. It will take place in 3 weeks," she continued with the same enthusiasm with which she seemed to choose curtains for the living room or present a new Teflon frying pan to her friends. "We decided to have a party at our house, just for family and close relatives. Wouldn't that be nice?" I blinked, feeling my throat go dry for a second, and my thoughts, like scattered beads, tried to gather into a slender thread. "It's my birthday." They really remembered. "Oh, this is unexpected," I said cautiously, already anticipating how the conversation would turn in the wrong direction. "I was actually thinking of celebrating at that new Italian restaurant in the city center with my friends from work." "Nonsense," Mom cut me off with that impatient click in her voice that I remembered from childhood. "I've already invited everyone. Your aunts, uncles, cousins, they're all coming. You should be grateful. We'll take care of everything." I sighed, knowing from experience that arguing with her when she spoke in that tone was like trying to stop a train going downhill. The words of gratitude came out of his mouth almost automatically. "Of course, Mom, thanks for organizing all this." After hanging up, I stared at the phone screen, blinking slowly, as if I expected him to speak again and explain to me that this was all a prank or a misunderstanding. In 30 years, my parents had never shown such an outspoken interest in my birthday, and the memories of it flashed before my eyes like a chronicle from a forgotten past. When I was growing up, my holidays were quiet, almost unnoticeable. A modest cake, perhaps a new book, if you're lucky, and sometimes a warm handshake from a father, as if he were congratulating a colleague rather than his own daughter. David, on the other hand, hosted lavish parties with themed costumes, balloons, trampolines and, of course, a scattering of expensive gifts that would have been presented with less enthusiasm even at a royal reception. I still remember my 16th birthday. Instead of the promised driving lessons from my parents, I received a $20 gift card to the bookstore, accompanied by a brief explanation that they were saving up for more important things. 3 years later, David received a used but quite decent car for his 16th birthday, which he crashed 3 weeks later, and which they replaced with another without a single reproach. When I moved in at the age of 18, I made a promise to myself: never expect anything from them again. No gifts, no care, no justice. I graduated from college, got an additional job, spent evenings in the library and weekends on internships, step by step building a career as a project manager in a marketing firm, relying more and more solely on myself with each successful step. Their outright favoritism, although it left painful scars in me, became both a lesson and an incentive. It taught me to be strong, independent, and truly grown up. So why now, after all these years, have they suddenly decided to give me a party? A part of me, the one I had been trying to silence for a long time, wanted to believe that this was a gesture of reconciliation, that maybe they had finally realized how unfair they had been all along. Perhaps turning 30 made them look at the past from a different perspective. But it still seemed too far-fetched. I returned to my computer, pushing away obsessive thoughts about my family. At the moment, it was more important to complete the project, a proposal that could earn a substantial commission if approved and become a significant contribution to my rapidly growing savings. Last year alone, I closed 3 major projects, each of which brought tangible bonuses. 2 months ago, I finally used up my savings and took out a mortgage on my own apartment, small but cozy, in a quiet area, without frills, but with the feeling that I finally found my personal space, my harbor. The phone vibrated again, this time with a message from David. "I heard moms are planning your birthday." "It sounds like fun," he wrote, and even in that short sentence, I could read his trademark sarcasm, which he addressed to me all his life. David is now 27, and he still wears the crown of the golden child, even though 3 years ago, having no business experience and possessing only mediocre artistic talent, he announced that he was opening a tattoo parlor. Our parents were thrilled. They helped him with the investments, as if they were talking about a great artist whose name would soon shine on the posters of galleries. Of course, judging by his social media accounts, you'd think he was extraordinarily successful. His Instagram was filled with photos of exotic vacations, carefully selected camera angles against azure lagoons and sparkling cocktails, expensive clothes in which he posed as if he were shooting for the cover of a fashion magazine, and women, each of whom looked as if she had just been pulled from a glossy catalog. Each post was constructed down to the smallest detail, like a jigsaw puzzle designed to assemble the perfect picture of a successful, independent, and respected entrepreneur, but knowing him not from filters and hashtags, but from conversations between his parents, from scattered glances and vague plans, I suspected that reality was far from so brilliant. Still, I couldn't, or maybe I didn't want to, be distracted by doubts. Over the next 3 weeks, I threw myself into my work, allowing myself to wallow in schedules, deadlines, meetings with clients, and an ever-burning mailbox, as if in this mechanical rhythm I could drown out the hum of inner anxiety, trying not to think too much about the upcoming holiday dinner, which was being recalled more often with each passing day. During the day, there were calls, messages, and random mentions. When Friday finally arrived, I notified the office in advance and left work a little earlier, feeling a slight anxiety in my stomach, similar to the one that appears before an exam or an important conversation. I chose a simple but elegant blue dress, businesslike in cut, but with a hint of celebration, and went to my parents' house in the suburbs, the very house where I grew up, where memories were hidden around every corner, stacked like old wallpaper, where the walls remembered my voice, my quarrels with David, my silence at dinner. Cars lined the driveway and street, and I immediately recognized Aunt Lisa's sedan with its perpetually dusty rear window and Uncle Alberto's heavy pickup truck, always humming like a tractor, even when idling. When I reached the door, I held my breath for a second, as if before diving into the water, rang the bell, and the door opened almost immediately. Mom was standing there with a bright, intense smile that betrayed both joy and control, and a drop of that pretense with which she always greeted guests. "This is our birthday girl. Come in, everyone's waiting," she exclaimed, slightly overdoing it, as if she were announcing a contest. The living room was indeed full of people I hadn't seen in months, and some of them since the last decade. Aunt Lisa, strong, smelling of perfume with vanilla notes, hugged me with such force that my shoulder cracked. "Edwidge, it's been too long. You look wonderful," she said with sincere warmth. Uncle Alberto, always loud and good-natured, patted me on the shoulder as if I were his colleague in the shop. "I heard you recently bought yourself an apartment. Mortgage, huh? It's impressive." "Thank you," I replied, surprised and pleased to note how the words of recognition awakened in me an almost childish joy. It took years of savings, but it's nice to feel that it's completely mine. From across the room, I noticed David's face. He was sitting hunched in an armchair, staring at his phone, as if everything that was happening around him didn't concern him, and only when Uncle Alberto mentioned my apartment did he look up, glanced at me with a barely noticeable grimace and returned to the screen, as if talking about stability and achievements was something boring and insignificant. The evening, despite my apprehension, was surprisingly pleasant. We ate my mother's lasagna, my favorite since childhood, which she rarely cooked, only on special occasions, and the conversations, at first politely neutral, began to flow warmer, denser, as if they were returning to their natural channels. My relatives asked questions about my work, congratulated me on buying an apartment, and talked about how responsible I had always been. "Do you remember when Edwidge was only 12? Aunt Lisa recalled with a smile. She started that little dog, walking business in the neighborhood. Even then it was clear that she was an entrepreneur by nature. I smiled, trying to allow myself to enjoy at least for a moment this rare attention, this fragile feeling of recognition that rarely fell to my lot. David was mostly silent, occasionally typing something on his new phone, a model that I recognized from the characteristics. It cost more than $1,000 and in some ways symbolized the ease with which he got expensive things. After dinner, Mom got up and clapped her hands, announcing that it was time for gifts. Everyone gathered in a circle, and I began to open the neatly wrapped boxes, a scarf from Aunt Lisa with soft knitting in my favorite shade of green, a gift card from my cousins, a sweet note from my eldest niece. When I got to the big silver box, Mom said with a special expression, "This is from David and me." I unwrapped the wrapper and found a high-quality coffee maker inside, not too personal, but certainly a useful gift. "Thank you," I said, trying to be sincere. "That's great, really." Gradually, the evening came to an end, the guests began to disperse, and there were clicks of doors and farewell wishes in the hallway. With each hug, I felt the tension subside, and the strange feeling that the loneliness left after the guests left was also a kind of gift. When everyone had left, except for me, my parents, and David, I started packing my things, already preparing to return home. "Thank you for your hospitality, Mom." "That was nice," I said, feeling a little tired, but also grateful. "Wait," Mom said, and her face became slyly serious, as if she was preparing for a long-planned conversation. "We need to talk to you about something important. Please sit down." The change in her tone made my stomach clench, as if the air in the room had become thicker for a moment. I sat down on the couch, opposite my parents, who were sitting on the couch, and David, still immersed in his phone screen, sprawled in an armchair on the side, as if he was not present here. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling the old satisfaction from the evening quickly evaporate, like warmth from a cup left on the windowsill. Mom and Dad exchanged worried glances before Mom took a deep breath and said, "Edwidge, this is about your brother David. He's having serious financial difficulties. A few years ago, when David decided to open his own tattoo parlor, he took out several loans to develop the business," his father added, his voice strained. "Unfortunately, things did not go as he had hoped, and now he is experiencing difficulties with payments." I pressed my lips together, trying to hold back the flow of thoughts. I couldn't help but remember how David rarely visited his salon, preferring to spend time at beach resorts, nightclubs and yachts in the company of various women. "How bad is it?" I asked cautiously, feeling a premonition of evil. Mom and Dad exchanged glances again before Mom lowered her eyes and said, "His debts are about $200,000. $200,000? I exclaimed, shocked. "That's more than I paid for my apartment. How is this even possible?" David finally looked up from the phone and, shrugging his shoulders, said, "Business expenses accumulate quickly: rent, equipment, advertising." "And why are you telling me this?" I asked, although deep down I already guessed the reason. My father cleared his throat and, avoiding my gaze, said, "We think you should help your brother with his debts. Maybe you should sell your apartment to cover David's expenses and give him the opportunity to start from scratch." There was a heavy silence in the room. I looked at my parents, expecting them to say it was a joke, but their faces remained serious. "Do you want me to sell my apartment, which I've been saving up for years, to help David out?" My voice was trembling with suppressed emotion. "He's your brother," my father said firmly. "A family should support each other." I turned my gaze to David, who looked slightly embarrassed, but continued to text on his phone, a barely noticeable smile playing on his lips. "I'm not selling my apartment," I said quietly but decisively, getting up. David raised his head and said irritably, "You're a terrible sister. I knew you wouldn't help." "You can't be serious," I said, looking from David to my parents. "He has a yacht, he drives a Porsche. Why shouldn't he sell them?" "They are important for my image as a businessman." David became animated. "I can't sacrifice my professional image." "Isn't my house important?" I asked indignantly. "The house I've been saving up for years." "You're being selfish," Mom said, her voice rising. "David needs our help. As his older sister, you have to support him. What about all the support you've given him compared to me all his life?" The words came out before I could stop them. "Cars, vacations, business investments." "That's different," my father said dismissively. "He had other needs than you." "Other needs?" I repeated, shocked. "When I needed braces, you said you couldn't afford it." 6 months later, David received an expensive gaming system for Christmas. "When I needed help with college tuition, you said I should take out loans." But when David wanted to open a tattoo parlor with no experience, you handed him thousands. "Stop exaggerating," Mom snapped. "We have always treated you both fairly." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. "I'm not selling my apartment, and that's the end of the discussion," I said firmly. Mom's face hardened. She got up, walked over to the coffee table, and grabbed the coffee maker box they had given me earlier. "You don't deserve gifts from us," she said coldly, pushing the box aside. I stared at her in shock. Even for her it was cruel, so cruel that for a moment it seemed as if the air in the room was thickening, turning into a viscous, impenetrable cloud of resentment and despair, where every word thrown like a bullet leaves a mark not only in my mind, but also in the very essence of my being. "I think you should leave," Dad said, standing next to Mom, and although her voice wasn't loud, it sounded like a sentence from which there was no hiding, no shutting out, no running away. "If you can't support your brother in a difficult moment, you don't deserve to be a part of this family," she continued, each syllable piercing my skin like a shard of ice. "You don't deserve to be our daughter," my mother added coldly, and I felt an invisible platform begin to crack under my feet, on which the illusion of belonging, blood unity, and unconditional love had been based for decades. David watched the whole scene from his armchair with an expression of self-satisfaction that instantly made my blood boil. He didn't even try to hide the triumphant satisfaction that splashed in his eyes like champagne in a victor's glass. "Great," I breathed, feeling tears start to roll down my cheeks, which I won't allow myself to wipe away until I leave this house. I'm going home. To the apartment I deserve. Which belongs to me. And which I won't sell for anything." "Get out," Mom hissed, as if I were an outsider who had accidentally wandered into their perfect living room. "Just get out." I turned to the door, trying to maintain my dignity, which seemed to have a little more left than a wounded lioness, and left without looking back. None of them followed me. The door slammed loudly behind me, not only the front door, but also the one that is forever closing between me and the people I have called my family for many years. The road home blurred before my eyes, mixed with streams of tears and the flickering light of street lamps. My phone kept vibrating, messages filling the screen like raindrops on glass, but I ignored them until I finally found myself in the silence of my apartment, which now seemed even more comfortable, even more mine. When I did look, I almost immediately felt sorry. "Mother, you're an ungrateful girl. After all we've done for you. Dad, your selfishness is disappointing. Think about what's more important, your brother's future or your own greed." David sent the most disgusting thing: "Have fun being alone in your precious apartment. Maybe you should embrace mortgage securities. No man would want to live with such a selfish bitch. It must be nice to be so ugly inside, at least it matches your appearance. You're going to die alone in this apartment. Congratulations on a great investment." I dropped the phone on the couch, as if it had burned my fingers, and burst into tears. Bitterly, soundlessly, choking the breath. "Happy birthday, Edwidge." When the tears ran out, I got up and went to the bathroom. The cold water burned his face, bringing him back to reality for a moment. In the mirror, I saw a woman with reddened eyes and swollen eyelids, tired but unexpectedly composed. And a strange, unintentional calm began to spread its wings in his chest. What did I really lose this evening? Parents who never prioritized me. A brother who only sees me as an ATM? What kind of family was it? I made myself a cup of tea, sat down at the kitchen table, and looking out the window at the slowly falling snow, I began to remember everything I had done over the past year. Every month, I sent my parents $1,200, $700 for a car loan when the old car finally broke down, and another $500 for utility bills. They never asked, but I offered. I thought this was family. I opened the banking application and found a tab with regular transfers. 2 clicks and they're gone. It was scary, but at the same time, liberating. Then I turned on my laptop and started typing a letter. Mom and Dad, since you have made it clear that you no longer consider me your daughter, I will not continue to financially support strangers. Monthly transfers to your car loan and utility bills have been canceled and will take effect immediately. If David's financial future is so important to you, perhaps you can redirect the $1,200 per month that you now have to provide for his debts. Please don't contact me again. Trera. I hit send before I could change my mind, turned off my phone, took a long hot shower, and got into bed. Tomorrow is Saturday. Fortunately, I don't have to go to work, because after tonight, I probably wouldn't be able to get up. In the morning, as soon as I turned on my phone, it came alive like a snake that had just broken out of hibernation. Notifications were pouring in one after another, 53 missed calls, dozens of messages. I flipped through them with detached, almost scientific curiosity. Mom, how dare you cancel these payments without discussing them first? Call me back immediately. Dad, your mother is very upset. What you did was incredibly cruel. David, well done for framing Mom and Dad to get back at me, really mature. The messages became more and more frantic and angry, as if they were not written by my parents and brother, but by unknown entities hungry for my pain, humiliation, and submission, as if every word was deliberately sharpened to cut me into pieces. And the last one, sent just 30 minutes ago, was a message from my mother. We need to talk. Call me back now, as if I were her subordinate, obligated to report as soon as she gave me a command, as if everything that happened could be erased with a single phrase, zeroed out, forgotten, reshaped to suit her own version of the truth. My phone rang with her number, and although my heart gave a painful jolt, after a moment's hesitation, I answered anyway, knowing that I would not be able to close this gestalt without an answer. How could you do this to us? She demanded, without even bothering to start with a greeting, with the usual human recognition of my existence beyond the functional role of a daughter and a credit machine. Do what I asked you to do calmly, she added in a lower voice, as if she harbored the illusion of control. Stop supporting people who don't consider me family, I said, and my voice sounded surprisingly confident, without the tremor with which my resolve usually collapsed at just one glance. At the mother. It seems reasonable to me, I continued, that you had no right, she interrupted, but I didn't give her a chance to seize the initiative. Actually, I had every right, it's my money. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and when my mother's voice cut through the silence again, it took on that velvety, sticky, manipulative tone that always made my stomach clench. Edwidge, darling. We were upset last night, something was said, in the heat of the moment. Why don't you come over today so we can discuss it as adults? No, I replied, and my no sounded like a landslide, like the final decision of a man sentenced to freedom. I'm not coming. And I won't change my mind about payments or my apartment. Her voice broke, lost its assumed calm, became real, human, frightened. We can't cope without this money, Edwidge, just about paying for the car. You should have thought about this earlier, I interrupted, before demanding that I sell my house and call me names. I won't be your backup plan anymore. Goodbye, Mom. I didn't expect an answer. I hung up the phone and immediately blocked all their numbers. Then there were email addresses, social media, everything through which their voices could creep back into my reality. Maybe it looked petty, but it was necessary for my mental health, like a dam built against a storm. The next week was surprisingly peaceful. The constant feeling of exhausting tension was gone, as if I was learning to breathe deeply again, without looking back, without waiting for a trick, without choosing my every word in mental dialogues with my family. I began to focus better on my work. I easily closed the project ahead of schedule, arousing the admiration of my boss, and, to my joy, I got a new client, whom the entire department had been trying to get for several months. I slept more peacefully, not waking up in the middle of the night from the guilt that used to sit like a shadow on the edge of my bed. But on Friday, when I was just beginning to believe in the strength of this fragile peace, it collapsed with a bang when there was a sudden knock on the door. My Aunt Lisa was standing in the doorway. "Edwidge, I hope you don't mind that I dropped by," she said with forced lightness, but I saw the tension in her eyes. "I have news for you." I automatically invited her inside, went to the kitchen to cook something while she settled on the couch. When I returned with 2 glasses of water, I barely had time to put them on the table when Lisa got down to business. "Your parents are telling everyone a very interesting story," she said, and it became clear from her intonation that this story smells like a lie. "According to them, you refuse financial help because they didn't give you a sufficiently expensive birthday present." I almost choked on the water, and when I could say, "What else?" my voice was filled with bewilderment, despair, and dull anger. "Your mother claims that you demanded that they transfer their house to you, otherwise you will stop helping with the bills," Lisa continued, carefully watching my reaction. I took a deep breath, as if before a painful confession, and told her everything: the birthday dinner, the insults, the ultimatum to sell the apartment, the cruel messages that poured in after I refused. "I have proof," I added, and handed her the phone, opening the correspondence where my family called me ugly, predicted loneliness, accused me of being unworthy of being their daughter, all just because I refused to sacrifice the only stable anchor in my life for the sake of David's debts. Lisa's face darkened as she scrolled through the messages, squinting and muttering, "It's disgusting." I nodded, and she continued, a little louder, "And now they're playing victims, as always. I've watched how they treated you compared to David for 30 years. Do you remember when you were 10 and you won that school science fair? Your mother barely acknowledged it. And 2 years later, David built that mediocre volcano that didn't even erupt properly, and they gave him a birthday dinner with cake and balloons." Her words seemed to break through a dam of memories. I felt that sharp resentment again when David crashed the family car and bought him a new one, and I saved up for years to afford the first, modest, used one. I got socks for Christmas, while David got the latest model of a game console. After Aunt Lisa left, promising to fix the situation with other relatives and gently touching my hand goodbye, as if assuring me that I was not alone, I felt both justified and exhausted, as if someone had finally seen the burden that I had been carrying for years without noticing. How much he disfigured my posture, my soul, my perception of myself, and for the first time in my life, someone in this family said out loud that what I was going through was unfair, undeserved, and deeply traumatic. With this short but intense conversation in my memory, as if with a quiet lighthouse in the fog, I lived the following days with an unexpected feeling of lightness, as if the chronic noise had gone away, and my heart began to beat in its own rhythm, not obeying someone else's ragged symphonies. The following Wednesday, I was sitting at my desk in the office. Rain drifted lazily outside the window, and in my hands I had a client offer that required attention and concentration, which seemed to have just begun to return to me after everything I had been through, when my office phone rang. The monotonous voice of the security guard in the lobby sounded through the speaker. "Miss Conti, there's a couple here who claims to be your parents. They insist that they need to see you." My heart jumped as if from cold water, and I abruptly straightened up in my chair, feeling the tremor begin to rise from the tips of my fingers up. "I don't want to see them, Sam. Please don't let them go," I said quickly, looking at the screen as if I could control what was happening below through it. "No problem," he replied. "Should I ask them to leave the premises?" I froze, then heaved a sigh. "Tell them I'll go down to the lobby and talk to them for 5 minutes. But only 5. That's all." I rode down in the elevator, staring intently at my reflection in the mirrored wall of the cabin, mentally building phrases, shields, barriers, because I knew they didn't come with apologies. When the elevator doors opened, I immediately saw them at the security desk, my mother with reddened eyes, clutching a handkerchief so tightly, as if her life depended on it, and my father, exhausted, as if after an illness, with a haggard face and a dull look. "You have 5 minutes," I said coldly, leading them to a corner of the lobby, away from prying ears and prying eyes. "It's gone far enough," my father began, struggling to find the words. "Your aunt told everyone your version of events, and now the whole family treats us like monsters." "My version?" I asked bitterly. "You're exaggerating everything," hissed the mother, clenching her jaw. "We were just asking you for help, and you turned it into this. This is identity murder." "I showed Aunt Lisa the messages you sent me," I replied calmly. "Were your exact words calling me ugly and predicting that I would die alone an exaggeration?" They exchanged glances, awkwardly, like schoolchildren caught in a lie. "We were upset," the father muttered. "People say things they don't mean when they're upset." "The way I see it," I said, looking straight into their eyes, "you've finally said what you've always thought of me." The mother's face was distorted with anger, from the usual powerlessness to control the situation. "It's not about ancient history, Edwidge. It's about how your brother needs help now, and instead of supporting him, you've ruined our reputation in the family." "You've ruined your own reputation by lying about me," I retorted, trying to keep my voice steady. "And treating me like trash all my life." "That's not true," my mother protested. "We've always loved you as much as we loved David." I couldn't help but laugh, not loudly, not hysterically, but softly, painfully, like a person who finally realized that he had hoped for the impossible. "Of course, Mom. That's why David got the car at 16, and I got the gift card. That's why you were paying for his business, and you told me to take out a college loan." "You've always been independent," Dad protested weakly. "David needs more support. David needs to grow up and face the consequences of his actions." "And you too," I said, not looking away. Mom's face changed, as if something had broken in her. She straightened up, her voice turned metallic, icy. "Good. If you want to play like this, we'll make your life hell. We will call you from different numbers. Write from new accounts. Show up where you work." "Sarah." Dad intervened, looking anxiously at the guard, who was already looking in our direction. "No, Bill. I'm done playing the good mom," she continued, her voice rising, getting louder. "We'll come to her house. We will contact her friends. We won't stop until she helps David. Until he starts supporting us again." I looked at her, no longer feeling fear, but only clear, crystal clear fatigue and firmness of a decision that no longer needed to be confirmed. I took out my phone and dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" "Alberto Cattaneo," I replied calmly. "Our corporate lawyer. I have already discussed my family situation with him." The mother's face paled. "Are you calling a lawyer on your parents?" "Hi, Alberto," I said into the phone, trying to stay calm, but my voice was trembling anyway. "This is Edwidge Conti. Do you remember that family harassment situation that I met with and that we talked about the last time? They're here in my office right now, threatening me. Could you come down to the lobby?" I stopped, listening to his answer, short and businesslike, full of habitual confidence. "Thanks. I appreciate it." I ended the call and, without hiding my intentions, looked at my parents. "He'll be here in 2 minutes." Mom wanted to say something, even started, "We really wouldn't," but her voice trailed off, as if he himself realized the pointlessness of continuing, and at that moment a man in a strict dark gray suit entered the lobby, with perfect posture, confident gait, and the penetrating gaze of a man accustomed not to waste time on empty conversations. He was probably in his early 50s, and there was not just professional training in his manner, but also personal dedication to the cause he defended. Edwidge, he nodded at me, then turned to my parents, assessing them with a cold and businesslike gaze. Mr. and Mrs. Conti. I am Alberto Cattaneo, a corporate lawyer for this company and a personal friend of your daughter. This is a family matter, Dad said dryly, as if repeating a prepared phrase, hoping to give the situation a touch of privacy that should concern no one. But Alberto didn't bat an eye. Actually, it doesn't concern you, he said clearly and with emphasis. Edwidge has already shown me the threatening messages you sent her. And now you've come to her place of work to continue stalking her. Let me be very clear, if you continue to contact Edwidge against her will, by phone, email, in person, or through third parties, we will seek an injunction and, if necessary, a criminal prosecution. Mom, as if suddenly realizing that this was really happening, looked at me in horror. Her lips trembled. You wouldn't do that. Try it, I answered without hesitation. My voice was calm, but there was determination in it. I won't be your punching bag anymore. From now on, all communication should go through me, Alberto continued, at the same time taking business cards from his inner pocket and handing them to them with methodical politeness, like a man who does not doubt the consequences of his words. Have a nice day. They froze, apparently not expecting the conversation to go this way. Then, without saying another word, they abruptly turned around and, without looking back, left the building through the glass doors. I watched in silence as they got into their car, not the new one, the one they had bought with a portion of the funds I had allocated under the pretext of temporary support, but an older, battered model that they had taken out, apparently out of desperation. I didn't recognize you. In a good way, Alberto said when we were alone. Yes, I replied after a pause. I was also surprised to discover that it was really me. And the truth is, after this confrontation, after Alberto's clear and peremptory intervention, my parents never bothered me again. The legal warning worked like magic, as if an invisible wall had risen between me and all the pain they had tried so hard to put into my life over and over again. She became surprisingly peaceful, without dramas, without accusations, without sudden calls interrupting work meetings, without forced trips dictated by guilt. One Saturday morning, during our regular conversation, Aunt Lisa called me. We discussed the usual things. As always, something about the weather, her cat, and a new soup recipe she found in a magazine, and then she lowered her voice. I thought you might like to know. The bank confiscated your parents' car last week. They couldn't pay without your help. I nodded silently, feeling a pang, not really guilt, more like the recognition of how much really rested on my shoulders. And David had to sell his Porsche, she continued, and that ridiculous apartment overlooking the embankment. I still didn't cover all his debts, but it was a blow. He moved back in with your parents. Is he still looking for a job? I asked. Actually, yes. He has interviews scheduled at several locations in the city center. Nothing special. Just a regular job. I smiled to myself. Good. The usual job. With the usual schedule. Maybe that's what he needed all along. After the call, I grabbed my camera, a recent purchase that quickly became a passion, a solace, and a way to see beauty even where previously there was only gray, and went to the city park. Photography has become for me not just a hobby, but a form of inner healing, a way to learn to be attentive to the present moment again. My phone vibrated. It was a text message from Rachel, my friend. She confirmed our plans for a trip to the seaside next month. I was happy to think about the upcoming vacation. Lately, I've been choosing friendship, joy, movement, and lightness more and more often, and less often I've felt a sense of duty to save those who never tried to save me. When I filmed an elderly couple feeding ducks by a pond, drowned in a quiet, peaceful dialogue without words, I suddenly felt a deep, sincere sense of satisfaction. My life really belonged to me now. It was shaped by my choices, my values, my desires. And, perhaps, for the first time in 30 years, I could say, I am truly free. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.